Amazing. So here's gonna be like several minutes of me just randomly talking about the Psychonetworks. Yes, this is genuinely called Psychonetworks Madness. Um, so yeah, it's because I've just never seen anybody else really talk about this in depth, and I just want to like rant. So okay, this is so disorganized. I'm literally gonna look back at my notes to see what I wrote. I think I wanted to talk about Konzer because a lot of people weren't really sure what his role actually was, especially compared to like the Freudian trio of Ego and Soup and City. No idea if other people pronounce these the same way, by the way. I'm just saying things. And also just about the Psychonetworks being more quote-unquote human than Andre is, and also the plural view of Psychonetworks. And by plural I mean like in like the multiple personalities kind of way, or well, that's like that's a weird way to say it because of the terms. Whatever, that's for later. But yeah, anyway, just basically where I started off with this is, I don't know if you can see my cursor, but at the top left, consciousness versus conscience, because a lot of people were kind of theorizing on what Konzer's role could be, considering it's not super obvious from the name, unlike literally Ego, whose name is Ego. Because I thought consciousness made more sense in terms of like the iceberg of connection to reality, which I'll explain in like a second here, but also in terms of like the Freudian concepts, because some people were like, oh, conscious, right? But I feel like then Konzer, okay, don't take this with a grain of salt actually, because I've only watched the video through once and not watched it again since, but then I feel like Konzer would be way more concerned with morality and ethics, which doesn't like come up as much in terms of his like text, and it's not as relevant to Minecraft ARG, but the protagonist is a speedrunner. So that's why I think consciousness make more sense for Konzer. And it's because Freud had like the 3 levels of consciousness, which is of course conscious, which is like the interaction with the real world, the pre-conscious, which isn't like directly obvious, but then you can bring it up by thinking really hard about it basically, and then unconscious, which is basically unreachable to the surface level mind. And just based on the Freudian concepts, then City and Fear would be entirely in the unconscious section, so they're more like the sort of quote-unquote sort of like base human or like animal sort of parts of the brain, whereas Soup is quote-unquote mostly but not entirely in the unconscious or something like that, as it basically just says on Wikipedia. Don't try to just flame me for this. And then Ego is like weirdly split up, literally says a quarter in the unconscious, a quarter in the pre-conscious, and half in the conscious, but that means then Andre wouldn't have that strong of a tie with reality if we're using like these are all parts of Andre within his mind sort of thing, which is where Konzer comes in, with at the top being the conscious. And then that means he's the most connected with reality, which also ties into why he asks like a lot of questions, supposedly. I'm pretty sure that's a thing he does, right? He asks a lot of questions, and if I remember correctly, he can also take clips of the speedrun. I feel like he does that at least once. Or they do that at least once. Okay, I know I was using they, them, but I literally, Sydney, you have impacted me too much. I have pronouns for them now. But then, basically, if everyone else is only distantly connected to reality, then Konzer kind of has to take the place of the conscious mind, interacting with and being aware of the physical reality, if we're all just using the Freudian frameworks for this. Because... Okay, whatever, I'm going to elaborate on this in a second. I'm going everywhere. Yeah, so as I wrote here, if I remember correctly, Konzer can make recordings or clips, and is the one who has the most questions, so that's kind of adds to my idea of the consciousness. And, everybody here is organized in Freudian theory, like, with Soup being the superego, which is like the sort of perfectionistic ideal view, the more sort of moral compass, and City being the id, or the it, the sort of quote-unquote primal desires, the unconscious bits of the human, the like drive without connection to reality, and then Ego, which is like sort of the mediator between them. As shown by their dynamics, a lot of people have theorized that they're the Freudian trio, in like the Freudian id theory. And then there's of course Fear, which is pretty straightforward. just wanted to drop how much I actually like Fear. I know Fear says like 2 lines and then also a bunch of and then it sends a bunch of emojis, but I don't know. I just think Fear is overlooked. There's just something interesting about Fear that makes Andre very human, I'd say, even though, you know, AI, the whole AI thing. Well, anyway. But, oh god, what did I write here? Freud, I will fight you. I believe lots of people can find an idea of their compass/direction if they think about it. Into the preconscious you go, my friend. Oh, I think I was just saying that a lot of people generally know what direction they're going, but at the same time, you know, like their perfectionistic ideal self. But then I guess at the same time, people feel a lot of emotions without knowing why. So, I don't know. What am I saying, guys? But yeah. Anyway, however, what was I saying? What am I saying? I need to read my own notes. My personal opinion is that, you know, they're not one-to-ones of the Freudian concepts. I like to read it more as like a sort of, they have their own personalities, because, you know, they're like the chatters. I do need to rewatch it to really have more clearly defined opinions on it, though. But I like to think of the Freudian models as more like models or templates, you know, for their characters rather than being entirely their characters. I like to think that they're alters or alternate states within, like, for example, DID, which is the most famous, which is dissociative identity disorder. However, since these are all sort of conscious and watching the reality at the same time, you know, there are other types of parallel systems or multiple quote-unquote people or personalities or alternate states within one body, like with OSDD or other specified dissociative disorder systems and things like that. But that's a lot of that is controversial and weird, and I am not gonna get super deep into that because this is about Minecraft. Anyway, but yeah, but I think these are sort of like fragments that make up the oddly like human-like mind of Andre, even though Andre externally is basically like, you know, both. But and like just basically being very driven, almost like automatic, like on autopilot. But these are like the parts of the oddly human mind, and the thing is, it's like despite the outwardly robotic, entirely speed-driven behavior of Andre, they're just like, I don't know, I just really like these, especially like City and Fear, because they just feel the most like human, because they're, you know, the unconscious. They're like direct manifestations of like human emotions. Even City is like, oh, I trust assimilation. I really like assimilation. Fear is like, oh, we need to keep moving. We need to get out of here, instead of being like, wow, the speed run. We need to go for the speed run. Whereas Soup is really the whole speedrunner. And also, can I just mention how I really liked how City can manipulate text into like really weird formats, flip letters, and also directly talk to Andre, and I believe can also literally get up and leave the stream and come back whenever they want. I just thought that was cool because it's like the unconscious mind, the primal desires, you can't block it out by just being robotic and apathetic. It's not going to completely disappear. It's something that's existed in people, and you know, even bots modeled after people will have the faults of the people in them. Anyway, but I thought it was interesting that wasn't the whole point that Andre would complete the game, not speedrun necessarily. So I do have thoughts about this, that the human-like superego pursues speed as a drive for game completion, because it's like the sort of internal reward for a human, right? You're like, oh, I gotta get a good speed. And even outside of intentional programming. So it's just basically like acts as a motivator that, whether or intentional or not, it's kind of just an internal reward system that pushes for the completion of the game to happen, rather than literally taking forever, never completing the game, being like, oh, we'll get there eventually. And then also something during development of the intelligence, who knows, maybe like Freudian concepts of chat, like what else did the admins throw in there? Because this also kind of reminds me of the idea of the Freudian death drive, which is like, I think it's described as like essentially the internal drive or urge to go back into a state of like death, because that's just how all living things are supposed to return. But you know, whether Andre is living or not is also kind of like a weird debate, because who knows how Okay, I was gonna go into my biology brain here and be like, well, does he reproduce? Does the species evolve over time? And then I was like, wait, what am I doing? Like, we don't know any of that, but yeah. Anyway, what else was I gonna say? Yeah, and also a lot of these ideas I just got from, I think there's like some online post somewhere being like, but a lot of people talk about how Andre's so robotic, but the Psychonetworks, it's like they're so human. It's like, I thought that was very cool. What was I gonna say? Oh yeah, also, can I just say it was really interesting the fact I did not write anything else down, but I'm just gonna be rambling now and just gonna zoom out and just, but, I thought it was interesting how City seems to be pretty indifferent toward speedrunning. Like, the lack of care sort of like sets them apart from the other chatters. As quoting the wiki, I think, lack of care sets them apart from the other chatters because each of them is at least somewhat invested. But I just think it's really interesting because it's like the base desire, or like the core sort of Andre's humanity, I guess, really does not care about the speedrun. The speedrun is entirely driven by the sort of perfectionistic ideals of oneself, you know, the super ego, because Soup is the one who's always time loss. Glad you didn't ruminate on that like horrifying realization, because that would have caused a 2-minute time loss. And yeah, according to that same wiki, I think only Ego and Konzo are supposedly able to make VOD clips. So yeah, so I guess Konzo can download the VOD clips. But then also adds to Ego being, as I hear on the iceberg, Ego being at the top of the conscious, even if it's only one half. Also, can I just say, it was really interesting how the VOD clip suggested the year is 2018, right? Because it seems to say 2018. But if Andre W 2002 is supposed to be like a sort of mimic of how some people put their birth years at the end of their usernames, would that make Andre technically 16 at the time of the speedrun? These are details that literally nobody thinks about. I don't even know what I'm saying anymore. This isn't even Psychonetworks. Yeah. Anyway. Can also say, the admins are not able to mute City. So I think that was just very interesting, because it's like Konzo writes Morgan once, gets timed out, and City does like 5 times, not muted. Ego's like, City, how are you not muted? And stuff like that. And other Psychonetworks can get banned, but it just, City's just never muted, and I thought that was really interesting, because it's like being unable to muffle the humanity, being unable to sort of press down those that internal core. Yeah, I just thought that was really interesting. I don't know, I have too many thoughts about this, guys. Oh, also, wait, what? Okay, apparently, according to the wiki, okay, my bad, I might have just been hallucinating what people have been saying about Concert, because apparently, some have also voiced the possibility of Konzer being concerned. I don't even know what to I don't know what to say. Yeah, I actually genuinely was not prepared for this argument. But I feel like consciousness still makes the most sense to me as a Freudian concept, because then they're all Freudian concepts. If Konzer is just the odd one out, that's like weird. Why are you excluding them? Anyway, but then also, it's just like interesting that they might be aware that Andre is an AI or something alike, because during the quote-unquote void fight, City is like, I'm not saying that. I'm not saying this verbatim. Assimilation over here, thinking that Andre can give up, and it's like it could just be City being like, yeah, Andre, you can do it. But it could also literally just it could be being like he literally cannot, like that is his purpose. He literally genuinely cannot give up, because that is the only thing he is meant to do as like his sort of purpose for life. Anyway, I have literally no conclusion for this. How long have I been talking? God. Okay, I am going to end this. No, that sounded so dramatic. I am going to end this recording and hopefully edit it very minimally. God, I need to like be a streamer or something. I hate editing. my own videos. What am I doing? Okay. Goodbye.